Ice crystals sparkled against the early morning light, catching every prismatic hue nature had to offer. The mountain's rugged flank stood immense and implacable before them, its summit partially masked by shifting gusts of snowy wind. As May adjusted the straps on her pack, she glanced sidelong at Kai. She watched him exhale, his breath crystallizing in the frigid air. This was her first time climbing with him, even though they had known of each other's reputations on the mountaineering circuit for years. They were both seasoned climbers, well versed in the perils they would face, but there was something electric about this moment. Perhaps it was the swirl of adrenaline, or the crisp winter dawn, or the heightened sense that anything was possible here on this mountain. She felt exhilarated, determined, and also unsettled by the flicker of something else in her chest. They had met at the trailhead only a few days prior, each accompanied by a small support team. Their shared goal to scale the nearly unconquered peak known for its treacherous ice fields and capricious weather. They intended to do it fast, traveling light, counting on each other's skill and experience to survive near vertical slopes and unpredictable ice falls. Safety lines, an array of carabiners, and well-worn rope were tucked carefully into their packs. Though they had come prepared with top-notch equipment, the knowledge that nature does not compromise kept their excitement in check. Their benefactors had arranged for them to collaborate, hoping this combined effort might finally crack the route that had turned away so many climbers. Initially, May wasn't sure how well she would gel with Kai. She had always climbed with her trusted friend Lucia, who now served as their on-ground coordinator due to an injury. Kai came highly recommended, but forging trust in the high-altitude wilderness is never a simple matter. Yet, over the past few days, a strange camaraderie had settled between them. May found herself smiling whenever he made a wry observation about the route or hammered an ice piton with confident fluidity. In turn, Kai returned her occasional grin with a certain warmth that made her gut twist in a not entirely unpleasant way. On this particular morning, the sky stretched out in pastel pink and orange swirls, tinted with a subtle warning of the possible storm that might embrace the summit. Kai double-checked his harness, then met May's eyes and nodded. Words weren't necessary. They had a schedule to keep if they wanted to negotiate the first ice face before the sun softened the surface into something dangerously slick. They set off in unison, their crampons crunching each step into the hardened snow. The cold pressed around them, but it was a familiar kind of cold, the sort that redefines life's every moment into crisp, unblinking clarity. They ascended gradually, mindful not to overexert themselves so early in the climb. Sharp shards of light refracted off the ice. One wrong angle could have blinded them if they forgot to shield their eyes. Their breathing followed a disciplined rhythm, perfected by countless ascents on countless mountains. As the sun rose higher, their route began to steepen, forcing them to rely more on ice axes and well-timed foot placement. The language of the mountain demanded respect and measured focus. Subtle shift in weight, the balance between tension and release in each muscle, and an unwavering presence of mind. From that moment, climbing turned into a test of synergy. Kai led the way, hammering a pick into the thick ice, stepping carefully, planting anchors. May followed, matching his pace, scanning the environment for signs of fractures in the ice or potential avalanche pockets above. With each secure step, she felt more connected to him. Their climb embodied a silent conversation painted in careful moves and mutual awareness. She caught snippets of his short instructions: taking the next ledge, watch for loose rock, and she offered signals in return: 3 tugs on the rope to confirm a safe route, a thumbs up after she double-checked an anchor. Though the climb was arduous, she discovered a sense of harmony in the shared endeavor. They paused to rest on a small rocky outcrop around noon, the highest point they had attempted together so far. The position offered a breathtaking vista, showcasing the surrounding valleys and distant peaks, their white summits glinting in the sun. Kai loosened a strap on his pack and reached for his water, taking small, measured sips. May tried to ignore the trembling that lingered in her legs, a blend of exertion and the underlying hum of tension. Not a bad view, she remarked, with an appreciative glance at the panorama. Her voice echoed softly across the ice. Kai placed his water bottle back in its pouch. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, he said, pausing as if considering something deeper. Then slowly he gave a half smile. Though to be fair, I'd much prefer it without the 50-mile-an-hour gusts. She chuckled, a sound that felt so strange, precious even, in the stark silence of the high mountain. Climbers never pick the easy route, she responded. Guess we wouldn't be here if we did. They shared a meal of freeze-dried rations. Each bite felt like a gift of energy, fueling them for the next burst of effort. Kai checked the forecast on his small radio. They were aware conditions could shift in mere hours, especially at these altitudes. Indeed, a storm threatened to roll in tomorrow, which meant if they didn't push onward as planned, they might have to make camp in unfavorable conditions or abandon the climb altogether. Neither of them wanted to turn around. Both of them were used to the punishing demands of their vocation. The next phase of their ascent was a nearly vertical ice wall. Even the slightest miscalculation could send them sliding hundreds of feet down a sheer face. A swirl of nerves flickered in May's stomach, but she forced herself to channel that energy into precision. Kai took the lead again, driving picks and carefully choosing footholds. She followed, matching his steps with the same measured intensity, even as her heart pounded like thunder. Her world compressed to the point of intersection between foot, crampon, and ice, the pick's contact with the surface, and the rope's tension that tethered her to Kai. A few hours later, tired but determined, they reached a narrow ledge where they would stay the night. This was an engineered rest platform created by prior expeditions, large enough for a small tent and ideally positioned to avoid the worst wind blasts. Setting up camp on a precarious ledge is its own art. Each movement had to be precise to avoid flinging gear into the void below. They erected the tent together, working swiftly to secure it with anchors in the rock. Their exhalations swirled in quiet unison, and soon they found themselves within the tent's protective shell, the hum of wind thrumming around them. Inside, the small space forced a closeness neither had fully anticipated. They peeled off gloves, face masks, and outer layers, letting the frosty air inside the tent sting momentarily. The day's effort weighed heavily, and each shift of a muscle reminded them of the grueling ice wall. Still, May felt unusually alert. She wanted to talk with Kai, know more about the person behind those calm, steady eyes, and not just rely on the ephemeral glimpses gleaned when they were suspended on ropes. She pulled out a small stove and started boiling water for their meal. Kai watched her, absently rubbing his fingers to coax out some warmth. After a moment, he asked softly, "What prompted you to start climbing?" She gave an easy shrug, though the question stirred deep reflections. "I was 12 years old when I first saw a climber's documentary. It seemed like magic to me, to conquer something so vast and unyielding and then touch the sky. My father was in the military, so we moved around a lot and nothing felt permanent. But mountains never budged for anyone." She let out a small laugh. "I crave that sense of immovable certainty. The rest is basically me following that dream." He was silent for a moment, eyes thoughtful, before nodding. "I think I understand," he replied. "That's something about mountains, isn't it? They're unwavering. No matter what else is happening in the world, they stand as a testament to steadfastness. I came to climbing a little later, after I lost someone close to me. I found that the only time I could feel at peace was when I was on a mountainside, forced to be fully present. It taught me to live in the here and now, something I'd never managed before." His words lingered amid the gusts outside. May's heart constricted with empathy. She wanted to extend a comforting hand, but she wasn't certain how he'd receive it. Instead, she responded quietly, "I'm sorry." He shook his head gently. "Thank you, but it was a long time ago. A pause, then he gave a wan smile, as if to reassure her. Mountains heal in their own harsh way. She nodded, letting that truth settle. The stove hissed softly, and soon steam rose in the cramped air. They prepared their meals in silence, though it was not an uncomfortable one. The bug of curiosity itched at May's mind. How had heartbreak fueled his passion? And how had it shaped the man across from her? The quiet knowledge that they were both pilgrims on a perilous quest, seeking something intangible, somehow made the small tent feel like a cathedral. In that charged hush, she sensed a flutter in her pulse, echoing memories of her first climb decades ago, that exhilarating moment of standing at the threshold of something monumental and unknown. Morning arrived with biting winds that rattled the tent's nylon walls. Outside, the sky was colorless, blanketed by a dull haze. The storm system clearly approached. May felt the pressure in the air shift, a subtle harbinger of what was to come. Together, they broke down the tent, stowed their gear, and secured themselves for the next leg of the demanding route. The plan was to make an aggressive push toward the upper slopes where they hoped to find another small ledge, or at least carve one out if needed. The day's climb was punishing. The wind howled, biting at exposed skin, tugging fiercely at their packs. The temperature was well below freezing, but the physical effort had them sweating underneath multiple layers of clothing. Ice crystals stung their faces, and at times visibility shrank to mere yards. They were forced to pick their way through rough terrain, occasionally roped together to cross precarious snow bridges that concealed deep crevasses. Despite the challenges, May could sense their silent bond strengthening. There was something deeply reassuring about his presence ahead of her, forging a path through the swirling blankness. Or behind her, offering a stabilizing rope when she led a difficult pitch. Halfway through the day, they encountered a daunting obstacle, an overhanging ice formation that towered above them like a crystalline fortress. Breaking through it required a strategy. They attempted carefully placed ice screws, but the formation's structure was unstable, threatening to crumble at any moment. As May chipped away with her axe, a sudden crack reverberated through the ice. Alarm jolted through both of them as a massive chunk threatened to break loose. May scrambled to secure herself on the rope, but the ice fell too fast, colliding with her forearm in a glancing blow that sent her heart hammering. Panic flickered in Kai's eyes for a split second. He steadied the rope, calling out her name. She clenched her teeth, ignoring the numb ache that coursed through her arm. She was perched on a narrow lip of ice, her body tense with adrenaline. When the ice settled, she tested her arm. Nothing seemed broken, just bruised. Relief washed over her. Kai scurried to her position, concern etched on his face. He steadied her, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice taut with worry. She exhaled, trying to steady her breath. "I think so. My arm's banged up, but I can move it. We need to be more careful." His eyes flickered over the wound. "We should find a safer way around. This formation is too risky." Despite the swirling wind and the raw ache in her arm, May registered the warmth in his gaze. For a moment, she felt a ripple in her chest, like an echo of danger turned to something else altogether. They retreated a few paces and rerouted around the hanging obstacle, moving cautiously. The detour cost them hours, and as the day wore on, the snowfall grew heavier. By late afternoon, they could barely see the slope ahead, let alone the peak over. The wind tore at their clothing, threatening to rip them from the mountain altogether. Each step forward felt like pushing against an invisible wall, determined to force them back. Up here, the storm raged with near mythic power, and survival superseded every other concern. Nightfall approached, leaving them with few options. They chipped away at the ice near a rocky outcropping until they carved a small pit suitable for their tent. Neither of them spoke much as they worked. They were consumed by a need for shelter. When at last the tent was pitched, they ducked inside, sealed the entrance, and braced themselves as the storm's ferocious gusts battered the thin walls. Inside their temporary cocoon, the air felt claustrophobic. They peeled off their soggy layers. Kai carefully examined May's bruised forearm, shining a small headlamp across her skin. A patch of blue and purple marred the flesh, but there was no sign of serious injury. As he held her arm, she noticed again the gentle surge of warmth in his touch. She was hyper-aware of the closeness, of the tiny space that forced them to all but breathe the same air. "You should rest," he murmured. "I've got the first watch. If this storm calms, we'll decide our next move in a few hours. No sense pushing on tonight." She nodded, and her lips parted briefly as though she wanted to say more. She didn't say anything, though. She simply flexed her arm and gave him a faint smile, grateful for his kindness. Then she carefully laid out her sleeping pad and crawled into her sleeping bag. She listened to the wind screech and felt the walls of the tent tremble. A few hours later, she awoke to the sound of silence. The howling winds had ceased, replaced by a ghostly hush that made her heart skip. Kai was next to her, still awake, fiddling with the radio. He glanced up as she stirred. For a moment, neither spoke. They were surrounded by the hush of endless snow, nature's own hush that can envelop your very soul. She whispered, "Is it over?" He tilted his head. "The wind's dropped. Might be just a lull, but it's worth checking." They unzipped the tent flap and stepped out onto the newly fallen snow. The sky was a tapestry of stars, glowing with a brilliance usually hidden by city lights. Though it was bitterly cold, the sudden peace felt almost sacred. Their headlamps illuminated the snow crystals, making the surface sparkle like fields of diamonds. In that moment, standing shoulder to shoulder in the starry solitude, May felt a mingling of awe, gratitude, and something far more tender for the man beside her. Their breath curled in the freezing air, and she let her gaze drift over Kai's profile. He'd saved her from disaster, offered comfort in the storm, and shared in the quiet wonders of this lonely altitude. She felt her heart stir with the realization that their journey had taken them beyond mere partnership in an expedition. Some part of her was opening toward him, drawn by the force of the same unwavering magnetism she felt from the mountain. They exchanged a look, illuminated by starlight. She realized that only a few inches separated them. She found herself wanting, in that instant, to let the distance shrink. Something flickered in Kai's eyes, whether surprise or recognition, and she wondered if he felt it too, the intangible current running between them like an electric wire. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. She was momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden sense that she was more vulnerable here on this frozen slope than she had ever been in her life. Kai slowly reached out, brushing snowflakes off her jacket. The touch was feather-light, yet sent a thrill vibrating through her. In climbing, trust was built in the face of mortal danger, forged by literal lifelines. Here it was something deeper, something that pooled beneath the surface of carefully built exteriors. The two of them stood, hearts pounding, for what felt like minutes stretched out of time. When he pulled his hand away, the silence between them told an entire story. They retreated to the tent, warming themselves as best they could, but a shift had occurred, a quiet understanding. Their gazes would catch in half-lost moments, and each time a subtle spark passed between them. Words felt unnecessary. They eventually slept, lulled by the cold's hush, wrapped in layers of fabric that seemed incapable of muting the internal hum of new awareness. Next morning, the weather was mercifully calmer. Though the temperatures had plunged even lower, their radios crackled with an update from Lucia at base camp. The storm was likely to return by evening, and they had a small window to make a final push for the summit. It was do or die, and they both were determined to press on. Their climb began again at first light, with May leading the initial pitch across slick, freshly accumulated snow. Kai followed, mindful that if either of them fell, it would almost certainly be catastrophic. There was a strange buoyancy in May's step, an undercurrent of renewed energy. She felt more attuned than ever to her environment, and the tension in her chest was offset by an inexplicable joy. The risk was still enormous, but she felt a sense of belonging to the mountain, to the moment, and in a way, to Kai. The hours passed in a trance of rhythmic movement. They navigated a series of steep gullies, at times forced onto exposed rock where the ice had split away. They hammered and kicked, forging upward, the altitude nibbling at their lungs. By midday, the final ridge came into view, a razor-thin crest of snow and rock that led to the summit. The wind picked up, but the sky remained mostly clear. Each careful step was a test of balance, their eyes on the slope, hearts thudding. Kai kept a small distance behind May, rope taut between them, ready to self-arrest if needed. The ridge was precarious, with 1,000-foot drops on either side. The sense of vertigo threatened to unseat their focus, yet forward they went, inch by inch, until at last the slope leveled off. A small plateau crowned the mountaintop. With breathless exhilaration, they staggered onto it together. The entire world seemed to unfurl below, a wilderness of jagged peaks, swirling cloud banks, and snowfields glowing in the midday sun. The wind howled across the summit, but no storm clouds yet marred the horizon. For a moment it felt as though they hovered at the very edge of the world. Their limbs trembled from effort, and each breath was a ragged pull of icy air. But the sense of triumph that welled inside them was immense. May turned to Kai with a grin so wide her wind-burned cheeks ached. She wanted to say something, anything, to capture what thrummed in her soul. Admiration for his skill, gratitude for his presence, the breathtaking sense that they had accomplished something untenable and that they had done so together. He flashed a similarly bright smile, his eyes alight with wonder and relief. Without warning, she felt her course surge, and she closed the distance between them, pressing her gloved hands against his jacket and resting her forehead to his chest. He encircled her in a tentative embrace, the wind whipping about them. In that raw juncture, she felt the hammer of his heartbeat, strong and relentless, echoing the adrenaline surging through her. She realized she was shaking, though whether from the cold or from suppressed emotion she couldn't say. She looked up to meet his eyes, and the air between them crackled with a culmination of everything they had shared: the storm, the near accident, the silent tent nights, the synergy of rope and ice axe. Slowly, as if ensuring no illusions would spoil the moment, he lowered his face to hers. The kiss was faint at first, a gentle brush as light as falling snow. Then it deepened, fueled by gratitude, relief, and something fiercely alive. The warmth of his mouth fought against the surrounding chill, and in that moment, the entire mountain faded away, replaced by the rush of blood in her ears and the press of his lips. Nothing else mattered. The storm that loomed in the distance, the danger they had skirted, the precariousness of human life at such altitude, all of it disappeared beneath the unassailable beat of their hearts. When they drew back, the brilliance of the sun momentarily blinded them. Their cheeks were flushed, breath forming white plumes in the air. May stared up at Kai, and for a timeless heartbeat they simply stood at the pinnacle of their world. 1,000 things remained unspoken, but acknowledged. The closeness that had formed from the ropes binding them together, the trust built through each precarious step and anchor, the silent confessions shared through stolen glances in the tent. They had found a bond that both had yearned for in different ways, a brand of companionship forged in the crucible of extreme challenge, revealed in that final, breath-stealing moment of victory. Eventually, the mountain reminded them of reality. The wind kicked up, and an ominous bank of clouds drifted closer. They didn't have much time to descend if they wanted to beat the incoming weather. With a final trembling laugh that tasted of sweet relief and anticipation of what lay ahead, they began their descent. As they took each step away from the summit, hand in hand for those first few strides, May knew something within her had changed. The climb's hardships and triumphs shaped her, but So had the realization that her heart had found a matching rhythm in Kai's unwavering presence. Their journey back down was far from trivial. The wind returned in violent gusts, forcing them to hunker down briefly. Loose snow at one point triggered a small slide that almost swept May from her footing, but Kai's quick reflexes and the taut rope averted disaster. By the time they reached the safer slopes near their previous campsite, night had fallen. They set up the tent once more, though this time the small space felt different. A sanctuary they shared by choice rather than necessity. Inside, as the darkness draped the world outside, Kai offered May his hand. She accepted it wordlessly, and they sat for a moment, gloved fingers entwined, hearts still swollen with the day's enormity. Tiredness clouded her eyes, but serenity filled her chest. They had confronted the whisper of mortality on the ice walls, had shared breath in gale-forced wind, and had reached for the heavens together. That kinship, forged in an environment that tolerated no illusions, now thrummed like a lifeline between them. Wrapped in layers of warmth, they fell asleep side by side. Whenever May woke through the night, roused by the shriek of wind outside, she felt Kai's steady heartbeat next to her, and relief surged within her. She found comfort in knowing that in the morning, and in all the foreseeable tomorrows, she wouldn't have to face the mountains or the storms alone. At dawn, they began their final descent toward the lower base camp. Each step carried echoes of their ascent, reminding them of challenges overcome and the transcendence they had found. Their rapport felt effortless now, a unity built on shared adrenaline and a spark that had evolved into something deeper. They reached the valley by late afternoon, worn but jubilant, and were greeted by the small support team. Lucia's face lit up, and she embraced May tightly, quickly scolding her about the bruise on her arm. Kai found himself swarmed by excited handshakes and pats on the back. There was a moment of chaos in the swirl of base camp. Equipment had to be accounted for, messages had to be relayed, and the usual bustle of a successful summit took hold. Yet despite the commotion, May could feel the invisible tether to Kayana and unspoken unity. Periodically, their eyes would meet across the campsite, and a quiet smile would pass between them. The pull was unmistakable, like a deeper chord resonating in them both. Later that evening, once the frantic rush of communication died down, they found a secluded spot near a small outcropping of boulders, away from the glow of lanterns and the chatter of the camp. Standing there together, they gazed up at the now familiar silhouette of the peak, cloaked in starlight. The wind whispered through the valley, far gentler than during their climb. May turned to Kai, letting the depth of her feelings illuminate her voice. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes shimmering, "for being there every step of the way, for trusting me with your life, and for letting me trust you with mine." He responded with the softest chuckle, resting a hand on her cheek and brushing away a stray lock of hair. "I never expected I'd find anyone who could match me step for step, let alone captivate me the way you do." He paused, swallowing against the wave of emotion. "This mountain, it tested us, but I think it also taught us something about ourselves and each other." She breathed in the crisp air, aware that in this moment, her heart beat in sync with his. "I can't imagine climbing without you anymore," she whispered, astonished at how natural it felt to admit it. Kai stepped closer, warmth glowing in his gaze. "Then let's not," he said simply. The stars shimmered overhead, and May pressed into his arms. High above them, the summit that had once seemed so formidable now stood as a symbolic testament to what two determined hearts could conquer together. With the memory of the blinding sunlight at the peak and the hush of the starry night enfolding them, they sensed that, indeed, their shared heartbeat was stronger than any climb they would ever face.